All right, there it is.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Human SOS Show weekly edition. And look forward to joining with everyone LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. Appreciate you taking time out with us today and joining us. Be sure to introduce yourselves. Let us know where you're joining from. And we want you to engage with us. So feel free to make questions, comments. And so, Anton, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, episode 60. We keep showing up every week because you guys keep showing up and asking great questions, giving good feedback, and we appreciate it because this is all about part of creating humanly sustainable organizational systems. That's what we're all about. And it's all about HR, but it's all about leadership. It's about life, health, all those different components. And I'm excited. Today we have Tim with us. Tim, I'm gonna try your last name because it's just I want to give it a shot. Mikhelashvili.
Perfect pronunciation. I'm used to so many different versions of it, Anton, that you just can't get it wrong.
Oh, I don't doubt it, man. I get mine butchered quite a bit. Where is that from?
From the Republic of Georgia.
Georgia, okay.
Country, the antique country in the Caucasus Mountains.
My dad went to school there for culinary school. Some really, really good food that guy used to make. He used to make the best plov in the world. I loved it. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so he's a leadership expert, and he's going to talk to us about leadership. Then we'll introduce the different things he'll talk about. But we'll first discuss a relevant article. But I want him to kind of introduce himself before, he just kind of sits here and hangs out with us. Tim, why don't you tell us about yourself a little bit? What do you do? What, brought you to the show? Different things like that.
Sure, Anton. First of all, it's truly a pleasure and an honor to be on your show with you and Kevin. I joined one of your episodes a couple of weeks ago, and you guys both inspired me. I think I learned a lot, and I've always been a person who is inspired by other leaders, other coaches, and I've spent 17 years in the pharmaceutical industry. I have a PharmD background, and they have been at various sized companies, large, well-known pharma companies, the AstraZeneca, Aventis's of the world, and the last 10 years I've spent in more startup, specialty, more agile companies, and I'm dedicating the rest of my career to increasing the energy, increasing engagement in our industry, in my function, in my medical function that I'm familiar with, in terms of training roles, medical education roles. And I've become more of an entrepreneur in the last 2 or 3 years, where I have my management and performance consulting company called Amedea Pharma, and a platform called All Out Coach, which is a podcast, a YouTube channel, as well as a weekly show that I have on Instagram every Monday morning and Friday morning at 8 a.m. I review different business books that are relevant, case studies, business articles that are industry agnostic, with some focus on the pharmaceutical industry, but not limited to it. And I invite lots of guests. And it's another way for me to share what I learn and teach with my network of my friends. So that's a little bit about me. And you mentioned the culinary world and your father's interest. So I see myself as not just a pharmacist, but also as a student, teacher, coach, mentor, and also home chef as well. So that's also another passion of mine, by the way, Anton.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for giving us your background. Shout out to some folks. Shout out to Shafil from India. Shout out to Utkranti from India. I apologize if I got you guys' name wrong. Kev, you got any shout outs on your end?
Welcome to Ashfac. Ashfac's one of our regulars. Glad to have you with us today.
Yeah, so let's dive, as always. Tim will participate kind of with us and chime in as we talk about this article. But as always, we start out with relevant articles that we see in HR, right? Things that we think are important to discuss, to some news. So go ahead and just hit past the agenda and let's get into the article, Kev. So can employers ask applicants about vaccinations and COVID-19? Just something to consider, right? It's something that is happening. It's something that is going to be happening. And there's a lot of pressure on both sides of the coin with people saying, hey, I want to feel safe. So I want employer to ask people and make sure that that's happening. On the other hand, people are saying, these are my freedoms. These are my choices. It shouldn't be determined, whether I do this or not by my employer. So some of the things that they're talking about is going to be more employers are asking job applicants about their COVID-19 vaccination status with the goal of protecting coworkers and customers, right? So they're basically saying determining any type of term or condition of employment based on vaccination status is going to open up a lot of legal issues for employers. So the need to think very carefully about why the person's vaccination status is relevant is present. So if you're asking, right, you got to make sure that vaccination status is important for their job description, for the duties that they're doing every single day, right? The other point that they brought up, so if the company's not asking employees if they have been vaccinated, it should not pose that questions to applicants either, because you can get into some really hot water with employment law and end up being sued because you disqualified a candidate based on something that you don't qualify the rest of your staff on. And that's an issue. And the other point they made is always be careful to not overstep with these kind of questions, right? So you have to be careful. So what are your guys' initial thoughts on, their view of this situation?
Go ahead, Tim, if you've got something.
Well, it's a complicated issue, I think. And I think that it has to be taken on an individual case-by-case basis. As long as there's relevance of the health status to the daily routine of that work, the nature of that work, I think there are some other factors I think to consider that may be job specific. So those are just some of my initial thoughts.
Cool.
Yeah.
Kev?
Couple of things interesting that you bring this one up today, Anton, because I just received communication related to my military commitment in regards to the whole issue of vaccination. And I thought that it was interesting that within that environment, we've been advised that we cannot be asked whether we have been, or we can be asked, but we do not have to respond because it would be a HIPAA violation. And then one of the other thoughts, as I have continue to learn, I work very hard to be educated in regards to the COVID and vaccinations and so on. There is another part that is out there that's going to complicate things, and that is there's a body of information science that indicates that there may be a negative side to having the vaccination in terms of skin cell shedding and the potential of distributing the virus through that process. So it's not going to be a simple answer. And to me, I go back and I think about in the past, we've had vaccinations for a lot of different things, and we have never made it a question in regards to good standing as an employee or a question related to potential employment. And I think it would be really a dangerous precedent to go down this road with it. I do agree with you, though, if companies choose to go down that road, whatever they do, they have to be completely consistent across the board. Otherwise, we're getting into EEOC violations. And so, yeah, it's a quagmire that people are going to be stepping into if they're not real careful.
Hit the next slide, Kev. I got one more with some notes on here. But the argument from the employee side is some people are going to take the, ADA approach, and basically American with Disabilities Act saying that prohibits employers from asking applicants questions that are likely to reveal the existence of a disability before making a job offer. Well, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission came out and has clarified that asking employees whether they have received a COVID-19 vaccine is not a disability-related inquiry under the ADA. But at the same time, the lawyer that they were interviewing for this article, last name's Mons, said it's often that it's not going to be worth the trouble for most employers to ask about vaccination status, because just the legal unseen ramifications that can happen from it are going to be a really big deal. So he said, ultimately, defend themselves, employers will likely have to show that their vaccination policy is job related and consistent with business necessity. So if you do ask, make sure that it's in a job description. That's something to also understand. Vaccination status has to be in the job description when you're sending out those, employment opportunities. Any thoughts here, guys?
Well, one of the things come to mind, and this is something that actually occurred. Welcome, Sam Delgado, he's one of my neighbors and colleagues. But one of the things interesting, a different perspective on this is I know of at least one situation where a medical worker that had already had the COVID virus was actually given favorable consideration for hiring because at that point, theoretically, they were immune. So there's a lot of different sides to this whole virus question and how it's going to unfold from an employment standpoint. A lot of different factors.
Well, let's get into conversation with our guests, since that's really what we're here for and what we're focused on. Before we dive into the presentation, I just want to ask you, Tim, randomly, what made you pursue leadership development, right? What made you decide I want to go help other people become better leaders?
Yeah, Anton, to answer this question, I really have to reflect on my past, on probably my early career or even childhood. I'll start with probably with my first role, I actually worked in New Jersey in the pharmaceutical industry, but I came to New Jersey from New Orleans. And New Orleans, there weren't that many opportunities in the pharmaceutical industry. So, they actually opened a new rotation because of the interest that I had demonstrated to our dean of the School of Pharmacy at Xavier College of Pharmacy. And so that was one of the ways I got into the pharma industry, through my initiative, right? But I think that when I came in, in my first role, I didn't see myself as a contract. This was a contract position. It was a 1-year contract position in headquarters in medical. And I was given some opportunities to attend leadership courses, listen to leaders like you, like Kevin. And, in every course that I probably attended, without fail, there's always someone who's there who would say, well, leadership is not for me. This is not for me, right? It's like, I'm not a leader. Okay, this is a good course, but they would be critical of that course. I don't think that there's any leadership course that's perfect, that's out there for everyone, that's cut out for everyone. But I always, I think, found something to learn from, something to get inspired by from other leaders. So I was always inspired by those leadership opportunities I learned. I think that had a lot to do with the passion that I developed over time, because I saw that that's where I want to be. That's the direction where I want to go. Right? That's the mindset I want to attain. And secondly, also, I observed other people. I observed a lot, and I learned that early in my childhood, growing up in the Republic of Georgia. We have this tradition in the Republic of Georgia where you have the head of a table, usually a head of the household, or someone who entertains guests, who says toasts. And when you raise a glass, you can't just drink it, based on this antique Georgian tradition. You devote it to some abstract idea, right? To love, and the goal is to really be inclusive of everyone at that table. And usually the children would be sitting down on the children's table. But I would actually always sit with the adults, and I would listen. I would listen and observe a lot of these well-known speakers and heads of the table, right? Which we call tamada, or toastmasters, right? And I would think to myself, look, I know this person. This person walks the talk, I know. But then I would hear others, and I know how they behave outside of that family atmosphere, right? Outside of that environment. And I knew it wasn't consistent. I told myself that, look, when I grow up, I'm going to walk the talk. I'm going to do as I say. I'm going to say what I mean. So to me, one of the best compliments I think I received early on and when I was starting out in my career by somebody who was very well known, in the medical education and the publications, realm, was Tim. Hey, you're perceptive. He noticed that I perceived other people, and that's why he gave me more roles. He actually asked me to hire people, even though I was a contractor, and so I hired lots of people, lots of agencies, and he listened and he involved me in that decision making. Despite that difficult times that we went through together. And we went through quite a lot where we were acquired by another company. We were Aventis that was acquired by Sanofi, and it was a hostile takeover. And I was then in charge of hiring someone else to replace me without myself knowing of where I was going to end up. I had uncertainty, right? And I remember spending hours, Anton, after work in the cubicle, trying to really, make sure that this particular candidate whom I interviewed, who was different from others, who was differentiated, who was polished, who was ready, who had the right intentions, that they would actually choose our company over the others, because she was in high demand, this candidate, and I had nothing to gain out of that. It was really to demonstrate the value I had received out of that fellowship, right, out of that contract year, that first year in my career. Where I learned about all the different departments and how they interacted with each other and norms of communication in the pharma industry outside of my function even. And so, I think as I look back, those were some of the early signs of why I wanted to create other leaders, regardless of the roles I held. And she ended up being a senior executive now at Pfizer, and, we keep in touch still. I think that observing other people, is something that I learned to do pretty early on, and also maintaining character, right? Regardless of what company I worked in, I made sure to have the honor and that those principles that I carried myself, that I think have helped me differentiate myself, over time. I'll tell you one final episode. Early in my career, when I joined a large team of 70. At AstraZeneca. And these were people that were much more experienced than I was. They're MDs, PhDs, and they were working with cardiologists. We were actually competing with Lipitor, which was the highest prescribing statin at the time. We had Crestor at the time, right? And, I had been promoted pretty early on within a couple of years. And there was a new leader that came in, of this team, with whom we had sat down for lunches, we've even shared some beers together from time to time. And I remember, being audacious enough early, I was in my 20s, and I told him, look, there reaches a point, there's a threshold that we reach in terms of the competition. Competition is great, but then when it hinders collaboration, it becomes a zero-sum game. And it was just a one-on-one comment. And, the response that I received at that time was, look, I don't know if they told you how to speak. Maybe they told you how to speak like that in the Republic of Georgia, but, I could get you fired for this, and that kind of, and I understood that that's that kind of environment or that kind of leadership example was not the one that I was going to continue to subscribe to, So I stayed my course. I learned a lot at a company like AstraZeneca, which had this company culture slogan, which was action-oriented, winning the right way. It wasn't just a adjective, right? Integrity, honesty, but it was winning the right way. It was a behavior. It was a specific behavior. So I took a lot out of that experience, but I also stayed true to my character throughout the different companies I've had. And that's why I continue to mentor. And I think one of the reasons why, when you asked me about, a topic for today that I wanted to discuss, why I called it self-identity, is that the way we see ourselves is what determines our success ultimately, right? And so you need a mentor, you need a leader who's going to change your view of yourself, because much too often we see ourselves the way others condition us to see, right? As was the case with that leader, for example.
Tim, let me ask you a follow-up question on that.
Yeah.
I'm curious, an example of how self-identity serves somebody versus how self-identity or lack of it hinders somebody.
Yeah, I think self-identity is something that you have to learn about yourself over time, and it takes a long time to learn about who you are, what your character is, based on the experiences you have. I think, right? So, I think over time, once you accumulate enough, enough experiences, enough adversity that you're able to endure, you can then I think you are then obligated, really, regardless, to create other leaders and to share those lessons and that direction, that destination, that in which you want to take others, and those obstacles that you want to help others avoid. So, How can it help some people? So, self-identity that has other people in mind, I think, is one that is going to be more productive for an organization, for a team, right? Being selfless versus, let's say, selfish on the other extreme, on the other, if you consider that spectrum, right? So I think selflessness is another critical component of leadership. It's a responsibility that you choose. So in the workplace, you have to integrate your identity somehow, right, across that work-life continuum. Unfortunately, that ego that a person may have, right, or that has to be toned down a little bit, right, or in that threshold to some degree in the workplace, because you make a living by working with others. We spend most of our life, a third to a half of our life working with people with whom we don't live, yet we make a living by working and spending that time with people with whom we don't live, right? Compared to that, if you compare the people that you live with, your family, your friends, right, they usually have more of a benefit of the doubt that they'll give you. And that's why you have to be a little bit more cognizant and more deliberate in the words you use, in the language, and how you treat others. Not really assuming, not labeling other people as a particular generation, like a millennial. Okay, he thinks that that we should all work from home. Of course he says that he's a millennial. Comments like this, or the other way around. I think there is, instead of labeling, how being a little bit more deliberate and critical in our thinking can help us really make that distinction. But the more an organization or a business leader is able to bring out that potential of a person, so that the employee behaves within their character rather than outside of their character. They behave out of character, and so they bring their self-identity to work. The more trustworthy that person is, the more happy that person will be at work, and the more productive your company will be, I think.
Tim, you make a comment early on about having a mentor, and certainly encourage that. One of the concepts I teach in leadership is checking the mirror, and what makes up a person's mirror should include a mentor. Can you offer thoughts on other aspects of our mirror as we evaluate and consider situations? What other ways can we reflect to get a picture of ourselves or of the situation?
Yeah, the mentorship, I think, is a one great way to adjust for those blind spots, I think. And nowadays, in an era in which we have so many different ways to communicate with each other, yet we are so much more lonelier, right? As individuals, as a society, we're much more distracted than ever, and we're more over-specialized than ever. I think there's never been a time that's more critical and a higher demand than now for mentorship, which is why I'm so excited about giving back. I volunteer also within my function. Kevin, there's a society, a nonprofit society called Medical Affairs Professional Society. It's a global society that seeks to elevate the medical division within the pharmaceutical industry, because I think the medical division can play an important role in reclaiming the reputation and in growing the reputation of the pharma industry. And so mentors, I think, changed the way we see ourselves. Like you said, change the mirror our mirror, and you need somebody else to give you that feedback, right? Because in the HR environment and in the laws and in the litigious society in which we're living also, many of us do not receive that honest feedback, yet we need it. I recently interviewed a best-selling author who's a president of a IF talent management agency, Steve Hertz. He wrote a book called Don't Take Yes for an Answer, where he discusses that particular need, the unmet need for other people to mentor. But there are many cases, I think, of people who you may be friends with, those who may be listening to our discussion now, right? Maybe early in their career, or they may approach them, right? Somebody that they admire, but that person may be busy. They may be friendly with them. They may, but they may not devote and assume that added responsibility that you, Kevin, that Anton, that all of us are taking by, coaching others, right? And so there are different ways you can approach that as a mentee. And one good way that I listened to another coach speak about is ask for advice, and ask for a specific advice on that mirror to make that mirror more clear for you, and then once that person is then, obligated somewhat, right, to give you some advice, particularly if they have a somewhat good relationship with you, then you can make that dialogue continuous. And that's been some of the best advice that I've heard. And then, I'll also mention one other point that I think all of us, regardless of where we are in our career, we always need coaches, and not one, but many mentors and coaches. I have a coach. I have mentors that I continue to, tap into, and both of you as well, by the way.
And I'm biased here. Obviously, we're all coaches here, and
Yeah.
I agree with that. I've always had coaches. I've had coaches for the last 10 years, even when I didn't think I need coaches. And the thing is, mentors are good too, but sometimes mentors have bias, right? They have their personal bias that they're bringing. And I think that coaches, great coaches, not all coaches are that way, don't bring their bias, right? They truly bring what's best for you. It's all about you. And I'm going through another certification right now, and that's the drilling down. Stop being an advice monster. Stop telling people how to do things. Just guide them and let them find that path. Kev, pop up the slide deck, because I really like two of the next slides where you talk about the mathematics of leadership. Talk to me about these two slides. I'm really interested in how you describe this.
Yeah, sure. So, Anton, I mentioned earlier about my observations from many leadership courses, right? Where I've always had others who've taken it and they've said, well, this is not for me. This is kind of like, so they were inferring that it's a waste of time, but they have to do it. They have to take that leadership course that their management, nominated them for, right? Because it was an opportunity. And so I try at All Out Coach, I try to make leadership more approachable. I want to simplify, because I believe that we're all leaders, really. I know it sounds cliche, but we're all leaders. The mentees, those early in their career. It's actually about taking people to the next destination, right? So how that determines the quality of that leadership or the value of that leadership. So as I thought about how to make this simple, right, the leadership, I defined it using a math, where an absolute value in math doesn't have a plus or minus, right? It's the distance away from zero, meaning that a leader who may have a team of 100 has an absolute value of 100 versus someone who runs a team of only 5 people, for example. So much too often, the mainstream, the public confuses and defines leadership as something, as an absolute number rather than a relative, as an integer. And so of the net people you help versus minus you harm. So if that 100, if that leader who leads a team of 100 is not socially responsible, is discriminating against people, is not inclusive, right? they may not be helping those 100. They may be helping only 5, right? So their net value then is actually the net people they help minus they harm, right? 5 minus 95, right? It would be a negative 90, let's say, as an example, right? So it's a different way to simplify leadership and to demonstrate that you have to seek to defend the interests of others, very simply said, and to take them to a destination, to a next destination.
I have to say that I really like that, because what it makes me think about is, it's a quote that I think a mentor of mine told me many years ago, is that, Anton, if as a leader you wanted everybody to like you, you shouldn't be a leader. You should sell ice cream. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. But it kind of makes sense, right? You can't help everybody. Sometimes it's not up to you as a leader. And there's certain individuals on the team that are not coachable, that are just not meant to be there. And your job is really to get them out. So to try to think that way is wrong. But when you look at it from the way that you do, you're saying, yes, those are the numbers you're going to have, but they're going to be offset. But the majority you should be helping, and you should have a significantly positive number at the end, right? Is that kind of the angle? Am I seeing that correctly?
Yeah, Anton, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I also wanted to make those comments, made a note to myself. And I always mentioned that aspect of leadership, that, once you sign up for leadership, right, for those added responsibilities that either someone else gives you or that you give yourself, you can't expect to be liked by everyone. In fact, those that try ultimately don't end up helping others. And so you may have the best intentions, but someone will always invariably be maybe slighted by something you say. Maybe you didn't include them. Maybe you forgot to give them credit for something just because of mental lapse or something like that, right? So no one really has a perfect. No one is a perfect leader, but as long as you're moving in that direction, I think, where you're aiming to help others along the way, to show them the next destination and to help them avoid. You're a GPS. That's why that first slide you had was kind of like also another simple version of leadership, a simple definition of leadership. So, it's something that is accessible. It should be approachable to others. And now there are so many different ways and communication channels in which people can become leaders and can spread their ideas, I think.
Any thoughts on this one, Kev?
Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at the value of our leadership, and certainly helps give us some perspective. Also, kind of like the concept and thinking through how it applies to balance, because one of the things that we talk about a lot is balance in our life. And I like the idea of, that you've got the two different directions that you pull in and move in, and sometimes you might have to move of necessity in a negative direction, but if you ultimately are having overall positive results. So anyway, it's a good concept. And I also, and I'm going to back up, I appreciated the fact that Tim hits responsibility and because to me, that's one of 3 core components of being a leader, is that really big responsibility. And then the idea that you're guiding someone to a destination, and the term that I like to always use in that regard is vision, ultimately, that that's the big destination, big picture. So interesting information, a good way to look at it, helps me with some new ideas. Hope you don't mind if I borrow some of your ideas. I'll give you credit, but some of the best.
Not at all. I'll be honored only.
But coming back to that slide, Kev, coming back to that responsibility slide, right? And that's my follow-up question, because it ties really well into this. There's a difference of getting somebody to point B, right, to their destination, and whether they just got there and they barely crossed over their line, they're crawling, they're exhausted, they can't function, but they got there. Versus a leader that pays attention to sustainability and human sustainability, they got them there, and now they can repeat that journey and do it even better than the first time. And so that leads me to my question for you, Tim. How can leaders lead more sustainably from a people standpoint, right? We talk a lot about environmental sustainability and taking care of an environment, but we are really burning out the human operating system. At work, people are just running on fumes. And that's because not just of work, it's also because of personal lives, and they're combining, and people are just overwhelmed. So how can leaders see this responsibility and say, it's not just my job to get them there, it's my job to get them there in a good state of being?
Yeah. I mean, the statistics speak very loudly, Anton, across different industries, Gallup polls, in terms of engagement scores. And that's why in my, tagline, even though I've worked in the pharma industry, I say on LinkedIn, adding energy, adding character, and, one meaningful relationship at a time, which is what I'm now focused on, really. Because I think that much too often we are more concerned about the status and the following that we have, and we still have leaders, unfortunately, today who are leading companies the way they were before. Who are hiring people for the roles that they are, not for the people, and as a result, that's the disconnect that you're getting, roles. You're getting people to fulfill roles, and even fulfill them not at the full capacity that they could. We're so excited, we're so moved by the technology that we sometimes confuse technology and people, where we consider people our assets, right? That we even the language that we use also mirrors the culture that we condone and that we acknowledge. And as a result, I mean, I speak to many leaders, in the pharma industry who have great character, who that they stand up for themselves and for other people, because those are the kinds of people I always, was fascinated by. People who are independent thinkers, critical thinkers, team players, and selfless people. And so I think there is a huge shortage of leaders who are empathetic, who are ready and willing to describe reality accurately without blaming other people. Because I think Edwin Friedman has this great quote, right, that the person who is able to describe reality accurately without laying blame is the one who will emerge as a leader. And I think in our world today, you have to be able to be agile, be adaptable, and also be socially responsible, be inclusive. I interviewed a global diversity leader, the first global diversity leader of Amazon, Eleanor Angelidis, on one of my first podcasts on All Out Coach. And she says that, I like her phrase, the quote that she used, that a leader who's unable to manage the diversity and the friction of people that they have on their team is left with friction of people, not friction of ideas, right? Because it's that friction of ideas really that leads to innovation. Mm-hmm. But you're left with friction of people when you can't manage, when you can't acknowledge diversity, mm-hmm. and diverse thoughts as well. Another person I'll tell you that I really like, an Adobe CEO from Adobe, Scott Belsky. He has a book called The Messy Middle. And Behance was sold to Adobe, and it was a huge success. And he's actually the grandchild of Kaplan, the famous Kaplan courses, Scott Belsky. And he likens a team, right, to an immune system in which you have people who have the antibodies, and you have one person who's an antigen, right, who may have that foreign body, right, that foreign idea, that innovative idea. And if you are a leader that is focused on results alone, on today, right, and if you do not know how to manage conflict, which is a huge problem today in this virtual environment, if you don't know how to manage disagreement and work and manage consensus, and sometimes go against consensus, you're left with the kinds of engagement scores that you see right now. And so I think it's a change, it's a transformation, and transformational leaders, I think, have to be transformational during this time. We cannot be traditional in our leadership ways because our culture is evolving. Our culture is evolving, and so should the companies. I mean, the business leaders as well. In my industry, in other industries, I think.
I love it. I love your focus on conflict resolution and some of those soft skills, because not enough people see how this is like a slow drip of stress for people. It's not something that blows up in your face right away. It's something that is very gradual change. And because the change is so gradual, you don't notice the before and after as a leader. So you don't send that red alert going like, oh my God, we got to fix this. But it's absolutely present. And I love your focus on diversity and inclusion and how that A, limits your opportunities because you're shutting down ideas, but also B, stressing people out and they're going, why bother? Like, I don't feel like you're going to hear me. I don't feel like I'm part of this team, whether it be through language, body language, actions, communication, whatever it is. And ultimately, all we're doing is just constantly depleting our human resources. Like we're depleting them in the way that doesn't need to be depleted. We could be using people in the right way, but instead we're just stressing them out about a bunch of soft skill stuff that dinosaur leaders haven't learned how to adapt to. And they have to. It's no longer a choice. We have to do it.
Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier is something I struggle with is, on one hand, I believe that everyone, because of the nature of life, are leaders and need to have some basic leadership skills, and that and value that. But on the other hand, I know that from an organizational standpoint, not everybody is going to have the role or title of leader, and trying to find ways to recognize the value of people that are not going to want to or have the opportunity to move into a titled role of leadership, how we can value them as being excellent and good leaders of themselves, without making it mandatory that they have to be leaders of other people in the organization to be rewarded. And that's a challenge that I continue to wrestle with, on how to communicate that, and then how do we overcome that from an organizational standpoint. You have any thoughts on that, Tim, of any ways you see of being able to value people that are excellent at what they do, but are not wanting to step into the role of a leader in the organization? In other words, they don't want to take that additional responsibility necessarily.
Yes. So that's a great point. I think that there certainly are those people also who are not in that position, right? To have the time to dedicate that time to leadership, and so those are the kinds of people you also want to keep engaged and ask them questions. I ask questions, involve them, have them shadow other people, have them work with other people in different departments. You don't always have to follow a particular passion or interest. Sometimes you let the passion follow you, as Cal Newport says from MIT, meaning that once you focus on something, you may then develop that interest in maybe growing in some other role as well.
Right.
But I mean, I think that it's a hands-on approach is what's important in order to keep people like that still engaged, right? Because you want to check in with them more frequently than many of us do. When we run companies, when we have once a year evaluations that are done only once a year, annually.
Right.
So I think asking questions and then having some remedial actions that are specific is what really honors the what everyone really wants, regardless of their aspirations, which are two things, I think. The attention, to have voice, regardless of their title, right? A voice, belonging,
Mm.
And also recognition for their time, their efforts, and their presence, right? And that could be in form of compensation, metrics. It can be feedback,
Mm.
right? But it can be a form of recognition for their efforts, and it has to be timely, right? So much too often we think that compensation and metrics are these taboo topics, at least in my medical function. And I'm trying to change that right now. I'm changing the norms of our communication, because throughout my management consulting company, where I think that the culture and metrics should not be seen as two separate things. I think metrics ultimately impact the culture and organizational change and organizational behavior in the same way that organizational behavior affects metrics, and in fact, it should be quantified as well. Among those types of employees, in particular, even who probably are more willing to stay in a company as long as they have those, as long as they not just are part of a team, but they feel like they're a part of a team.
Right.
That they have attention, that their voice counts, and that they have recognition for, let's say, this project that they've been working on for like 6 months. That's very important, and they want that project to be distributed to other people in a timely manner, to other people who are decision makers, stakeholders, let's say business insights, yet they're not being shared because of pettiness, because of some kind of minor changes and things like that. And that's when their time, again, their efforts and their presence are being compromised, and they're not being valued. And, and that's what then brings the question, and I had this on slide 4, the spectrum. I think it's relevant to my discussion of self-identity, right? Of going from dignity, right, to towards ego, right? If your dignity is in question, or that's the threshold that forces people to leave, right? I think.
So let me jump in real quick. Shout out to a couple of folks that have joined us. Vasanth. Vasanth has been there before. And then to John Whittinghill. John and I go back a long way, and he had made a humorous comment about my background screen. He just commented that the child in the background screen's been very still. Yeah, John, I understand. Too funny. I've had a couple of people comment about my background. I may have to explore one without a child in the background.
Good perception there. Good catch.
And then Sam makes a good comment, about the fact that we are all leaders, and we are that, if nothing else, based on impact that we have on other people. And one of my favorite sayings in that regard is that we're all a role model to somebody.
Yeah.
Now, Kev, to your point, if leaders are struggling with trying to keep their non-leadership desiring employees engaged, right? Because that's the thing. That's the easiest thing to do to motivate people. You want my title? I know I can have an easy way to motivate you. It's just how you want something bigger in this company. That means that you already have the desire to stay. You're going to take on extra work. But not everybody wants that, right? Not everybody wants that, or not everybody thinks they want that yet. And you have to help them see why it's going to be good for them. But to that point, I would go and ask that leader, and I would say, tell me what motivates each one of your employees.
Right.
And go and one by one tell me. And what I'm going to look for is how diverse that answer is. If they have that cookie cutter, like similar answer across the board, I know the issue. I right away know the issue. The leader does not know their team. The leader is not able to understand their desires, their needs, to understand what is best motivation for them. Is it extrinsic? Is it intrinsic? Is it a combination of both, right? And that's what's important, is when you know your people. We as a society kind of over-indexed on all about intrinsic motivation, right? It's all about purpose, passion, this. But I like your focus on pay too. That matters. And to some people, it matters more than to others. And to some people, you can come and try to motivate them intrinsically, and they're not ready. The only thing they care about is justify my pay for my time, because this is a job. This isn't my all one thing for everything. I'm just coming in and doing my work, and I want to be compensated for that so I can go hang out with my family, do the things that I want. So I love the focus points you brought up there. And you know, you got to quantify and qualify things. You can't just all be this soft thing. And I love everything you're talking about, Tim.
Thank you, Anton. Likewise, likewise. And yeah, it's, much too often the way we hire, also the hiring process, is one, and the way we interview, right, is one in which the hiring managers, quite often they filter out great candidates. Who bring, let's say, who bring a personality that is not expressed in that interview. Like it's not. I think we need a lot of reform in how we hire people and how we then keep them engaged, how we retain them as well. And like you mentioned, Anton, I think that much too often it's that role. The role of the hiring manager, even throughout the interview, is one that the candidate, they sense that, look, this is a hiring manager. There's a hierarchy right here, and there is a this person may not be one who will be open to a strong leader. Who are somebody who's ambitious, who's not necessarily wants to take away the job from this person, but in the future, but that wants to go in that direction. But we don't have enough leaders who are strong enough to handle and manage those types of ambitious, forward-thinking candidates and employees. Like that's what that made me think of, Anton. Your comments there.
Great point. Great point. All right, guys, we got to wrap up. We're almost out of time. Tim, if somebody wants to reach out to you and they want some, leadership development or anything like that, they like what you said, what's the best way to contact you?
The best way to contact me is email me. Email me at tim@alloutcoach.com. I help organizations. I really am fascinated by how organizations are run, how they are communicating, what their norms of communication is, and which I'm trying to change. So if you're starting a team, if you're an established organization, I love to discuss innovative ways to merge company culture, organizational change management with metrics that you design for your teams. So Tim at All Out Coach, and I have a company called Amedea Pharma, AMEDEA Pharma, 2 words, which is focused on the pharma industry, pharma and medical devices, to elevate the medical function there.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for your time. You brought so much value. I know our audience is grateful, and most importantly, we're grateful for being able to bring this to our audience.
Thank you, Anton, Kevin. It's been a pleasure.
Glad you could be with us. And folks, we're here each Tuesday, 11 o'clock Eastern. So please come back and join us each Tuesday. Invite others to join. And by all means, when you join in, feel free to make comments, questions, even humorous observations about things where we can laugh and laugh at ourselves including. So thanks for joining us today, and hope that you'll join us next week and the weeks after, and invite others to come. Also reach out to us at prospectiveforce.com. Encourage you to go take our assessment that is available and use that. It doesn't cost anything, and get some feedback. And then if you want further response on that, let Anton or I know, either through prospectiveforce.com or direct messages, and get a hold of us. And if you didn't remember Tim's information, let us know. We'll be happy to pass that along, get you connected to Tim so that he can help you out using his skills, talents, and passion. So thanks. Take care, everyone. Have a great week, and we will see you again next week.
Thank you.